Daryl Brooks, outspoken political activist. I want to thank you for your time, Daryl.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciated this time with you, and I just want to also say, you're doing a good job with the Anwar Reflections, and happy anniversary for a year.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Trying to keep up the good work.
Oh, yeah, you got to, in this day and age.
And then speaking of work, you've been an activist for a while. Can you, provide our audience a little overview or background about who you are?
Well, through my history of activism, I've been, I don't know, it's kind of strange. I tell people I've been an activist probably since I was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. Mm-hmm. I tell you, I remember I spoke out when they closed down the North Trenton Library. I had to be like 11 to 12 years old. It's just a long period. But I think the really activism is when I went to college, Mercer County College, Black Student Union President, Vice President, Student Government, community activist. I remember one of my first activist things I did was I shut down a store on Southern Street because they was mistreating, it was a Hispanic store mistreating black kids in the city. Every time they figure a black kid in there, kid going there, they would steal. Okay. And I got about 20 residents from Dolly Homes, and we shut down the whole street. And next thing you know, Daryl Brooks is a black activist. So I think they got started from right in that way as an activist. Then coming up, right at college incident when they had the nigger night. I don't know if you heard about that. They had there were fraternity dressing up as black people, and it was called a nigger night. And I led a march on the campus, and the students came to me and said, we need your help. So I helped them out, and we got the fraternity kicked off. Okay. And also with the Rutgers, Francis Lawrence statement, he said that because of African Americans' genetic makeup, we weren't capable of learning. One of my, I think the best things that I really enjoyed was having the Dick's Sporting Goods. When the Dick's Sporting Goods, I was working at Dick's Sporting Goods, I used to see gang members coming in buying ammunition. This is like 2003. Okay. Around that 2003, 2004, and we had a protest because Dick's Sporting Goods, at that time you can buy ammunition. If you had a license, you can buy ammo. Mm-hmm. The idea is thinking, well, if you don't have a gun, why you need to buy ammunition? And then there was me, I called Kathy McBride and some other people. We got together, had a rally and protests, and
Kathy McBride is now the council president.
Council president.
Okay.
But we got together, we shut down Dick's Sporting Goods for a few hours, and basically Dick's Sporting Goods changed their policy. And then now let's say if you have you can't buy ammo without having an ammunition card, a gun license card. And then turn around, the state did an investigation and said that when they raided these gang members' houses, all they found was Dick's Sporting Good boxes. Yeah. So basically, myself and Kathy pushed that, and they made Dick's Sporting Goods change their policy. Okay. Hopefully, we saved some lives.
And from then on,
just period in history. I guess 25 years of activism, from running for Congress, U.S. Senate, and Tea Party work.
Okay. Working with the Tea Party. Okay.
Working with the Tea Party. And why did I work with the Tea Party? Because of the rotten politics that we have in our city, in our state, the democratic policies.
I'd imagine in a community like Trenton, you probably caught some flack for being affiliated with that group.
Only the people who think they know what the Tea Party really is, but since I have some, I guess, street credibility, from growing up, I don't get really bothered, so.
Okay. And that leads us up to today. Not too long ago, you were in support of Tony Mack. But now, through a phone conversation, you told me you had the inside truth, quote unquote, the inside truth about Tony Mack.
Yeah.
And Joe Giorgiani. Can you tell me more about that?
Growing up with Tony, I knew Tony, I guess, through high school, and after that, he got involved in politics and became freeholder. I believe, I did work on his campaign when he ran for freeholder. My understanding, dealing with Tony is that, growing up, I liked the guy, but when he ran for, 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 mayor the first time, you know, I worked on this campaign, me and Nate Walker. And, you know, I had some suspicions about Tony Mack and his loyalty back then, but, you know, pick the lesser two evil. You know, he was challenging Doug Palmer, and I was adamant in trying to get rid of Doug Palmer. And
what was your gripe against Palmer?
Just the lies, deception. He did nothing for education. He did nothing to bring jobs. You know, just dealing with the gang issue. You know, once again, he was all about the same thing: give a kid a basketball, give him a football. He just basically almost destroyed the kid's education in the city. He did entertainment. I mean, this is the type of politics that we had during the Palmer regime. I call it the regime. Yeah.
But you saw that Mack was a slightly better alternative than
at the time.
At that time.
Yeah, you know, I remember when Mack was running against Palmer. You know, it was all there. You know, Daryl. You know, we're all a team, and we all want to get things done, and you know, we want to challenge. You know, and I used to talk to him. You know, I'm down with you 110%.
Yeah.
And I remember I brought Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. I don't know if you know about Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. He was from Alabama. He was Martin Luther King's aide in the 60s. He had his church bombed 2 or 3 times, house bombed twice. You know, so and there was some issues with the voting, improper voting during that whole first campaign. So I said, Tony, you know, we're gonna make this historic. So I bring in Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, and Shuttlesworth came, and you know, and we were in the paper a few times and stood by Tony Mack, and he understood the problems against voting, improper voting, and so that was it. And then after the election was over, you know, I talked to Tony and you know about some things, you know, but I worked with during this election. I worked with Kathy McBride. I decided to work with Kathy McBride, and you know, hey, she got more votes than any of them in the general election. Right. Then, you know, this whole thing with the Tony Mack administration, how he just got started. You know, I questioned his judgment and certain things and his honesty when we used to talk. And, you know, when he asked me to do that rally for him, press release.
And that's related to the recall,
The
right?
recall, yeah.
They were attempting to recall the mayor, and you came out to support him?
Yeah,
or?
yeah.
Okay.
You know, I had told, people don't know that day, you know, that recall, that rally that had, I can't think, I was called the day before that.
Okay.
And they asked me to do it. I said, well, listen, I need time. You know, you just can't prepare, you know, you can't just say you want to have a rally the next day without, you know, preparing for it. And I didn't want to do it that day because I was really unprepared. And, you know, so, you know, we had the press conference, and I'm near, and I'm on the phone with Tony, and I'm telling Tony, you know, I don't think this is a good idea right now. I mean, we need a couple days to prepare everything. And they had gave me a statement, and you know, that's one of the things I was upset about. It was a statement that I can't think of the guy. It's on the video that he read, and it had my name under it. Press release. I had nothing to do with that, and I was so upset. Raphael gave me that, and I was like,
Raphael Mack.
Raphael Mack, and I was like, well, you know, why would you put my name out there in press and send it out? And I had a press release already done, but why would you put my name on something and send it out? You know, and it did all these things, and that bothered me. You know, that really bothered me because my name was on it, and I didn't know nothing about it. It was already sent out.
Okay.
And it was put all around town that Daryl Brooks said this stuff and put it on a press release. And no, it wasn't. Matter of fact, I sent them another press release to Tony and the Times, and you know that made me really upset.
Did you confront them about this?
Oh yeah, Daryl, go with it, man. It's all right, man. I said, you know, and I looked at him. I was like, you know, I'm start questioning now. Really, what am I dealing with? And so that was one of the things that was really bothered me, and the fact that a friend of mine who I work with, Lou Jasikoff, came down here, and we were planning, you know, if you're going to do a battle, we're going to have a battle. We're going to fight. We're going to do some things, and you know, and challenge him and say, I'm all right, but fine.
And Jasikoff was one of the Tea Party, or
he's out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. I work with him. He's a the Jasikoff Consultants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know, what bothered me is that, I noticed certain things about Tony Mack, and it just bothered me was the deception, truly the deception.
Can you speak more about that specifically? What forms of
The
deception?
lies, telling me that, we're going to deal with the issue with the inmates, individuals that got out of prison. There was a program that they had, and he got rid of it. And he said, Daryl, I'm gonna have you run the program, and we're gonna really.
Do you recall the name of it, or?
It was the rehabilitation program that getting people that was locked up, getting them jobs.
Okay.
All these different things where where I could go out in the community and go to businesses and do all these different things to get people with records back in employment, make sure their resumes are done. And when he was telling me this stuff, to be honest, I knew he was lying to me. I mean, I knew he was lying to me. I just wanted to see what he's going to tell the truth. After the recall, before the recall, you're going to be a part of the team. And my thing was, this is our generation. I'm fighting for you. I'm speaking out. People saying that you're no good. That they're saying, well, Daryl, how can you represent someone who's a liar, who's a deceptive? He's no good.
Okay.
And and I took a lot of hits for that guy. There are people that threatened me, wanted to knock me in the head with a brick.
Okay.
Walking down the street, joking, hey, I'm mad at you. They pick up a brick.
Right, just randomly walking down the street, somebody would say that to you?
Yeah, in the Marriott, it's crazy. I mean, it's politics. Calm down.
Right.
So.
That's how you responded to it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, it's politics.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a political battle.
Right.
And so that was my thing. You're not gonna knock me in the head with a brick.
Right.
So it were the people that even more that didn't like me before. Now there were individuals that even hated me more, and that bothered me. Why all these people speaking out against Tony Mack? And understand this, I didn't support the recall, and I still don't support the recall. My thing is, if his true colors will show. And if the city does not progress, then he's out in another 2 more years. I believe in the voting process. The recall was a bit much, but to understand this, the idea is that, he made a lot of internal mistakes with his whole team of people. There were a team of people that was not a part of his administration, that was a part of his campaign, that decided to say, I can't work with this guy, or Tony got rid of him. He promised them.
Can you cite any specific names or examples?
Well, some of the people, they already know who he is, but if you look at some of his individuals that worked on his campaign, they were lawyers, they were young brothers who were committed to the city, and I think, Daryl Blakely. Okay.
Yes. For them to speak out.
Yeah, Daryl Blakely.
Recall.
So I mean, it bothered me when I took a look at all these things, and they were telling me, well, Daryl, Mack is going to do the same thing to you. I mean, I'm a smart individual. I can see certain things, and I've always been, with Tony Mack, because I understand politics.
Okay.
And I knew certain individuals. How can I say? I knew the times when he was very deceptive and was lying to me, but I was too kind of deep into it.
Okay.
Okay. I was deep covered.
Really? Deep covered. Okay.
So it was just like, oh man, So I didn't like the Palmer people anyway. Some of the people on the recall. So I'm not going to even go that route. So I know some of the things they've done to me and said to me, and we want to stay side by side and kumbaya. Everything is going to be all right. No, I'm an independent guy, man. I don't dance to other people's tunes.
So really, I remember you were saying that you were in support of against the recall because it was a matter of letting the political process run out, and not allowing him to be ousted before And
who you going to get?
Right.
And the idea is that only reason there was I predicted this was going to happen. I predicted who was going to win. Only person I didn't predict was going to win was Zachary Chester. But I knew the individuals that was going to get in office. And see, and we pick politicians in this city because we know them, we like them, we party with them, we drink with them, some may have smoked weed. You know, this time I talk to politicians, yeah, I smoke weed with them, I party with them, right. I got drunk with them. What, does that mean that they should be our leaders, our political leaders? And are they politically qualified to be our leaders? You know, and this is happening to our city now. I mean, we have individuals that, you know, and MAC colors show. And there's certain members on city council that colors are shown. You know, that they should not even be in office, but because they're popular athletics. You know, Tony Mack used to he played 3 sports, you know, and that was the whole thing, you know. And Doug put him in office. Doug supported him, and they're all a part of this bowl, man. They're all a part of this one bowl. There's people in city council, and the mayor, and the former mayor of city council. They're all friends. They all grew up together. You know, and look what's going on with the city. They're all part of the same bowl. They're third-rate politicians. They're not even second-rate politicians. They're third-rate. You know, so what you get with third-rate politicians, Doug Palmer was somewhat of a third-rate politician. I mean, you know, there's individuals that, you know, Doug Palmer, Tony Mack, they're part of the same family.
So you're basically saying that Trenton politics is a popularity contest?
Yeah, it's always been a popularity contest. You know, I don't see anybody from Trenton running for Congress. I don't see anybody Trenton running for U.S. Senate. You know, they can't take it to the next level. You know, and their power is predicated on the white Democratic power structure in the city. You know, they're a bunch of yes people, appeasers.
Right. Here we are again. You know, and speaking about Tony Mack, Mayor Tony Mack, you talked about deception. You know, and you talked about the prison reentry program.
Yeah, the prison reentry program.
And
yeah, that's when that hurt me. He told me one thing and did another. And I just felt like, you know, this guy has a very dark side. You know, if you're loyal to him, I'm loyal to, you know, to some of these politicians. But as I get older and I start to wonder something like, you know, and should I be loyal to these, and should I have been even more loyal to these politicians back in the past and now? It bothers me because, you know, we're supposed to be fighting for the people. You know, not for your special interests or your friends to make money. And the people are suffering. You know, one of the things that's talked about when they had the layoffs. You know,
the police.
Yeah, layoff for the police. You know, and the conversation was like, you know, F the police.
This is a conversation.
Yeah, man, F the police. I'm like, well, how are you going to say F the police when, you know, there are people who are going to be dying and the people that need service of the cops? You know, that was unprofessional. You know, it's something like some gangsterism, you know.
Right.
You know. So even the layoffs, how he laid off people in the city hall, and then give himself and other ones, try to give himself and other people, his buddies, a raise. Yeah. And I questioned on that. He said, well, you know, Daryl, yeah, I was wrong. I made a mistake. And other mistakes he has done. You know, my thing is, you know, Tone has, you know, we actually thought that Tone was going to do a great job. And, you know, you understand some pressures, but the idea is that, you know, you have to be honest with people. You can't be, you know, telling me one thing and then you're lying to me. And I'm telling the people, yeah, he supports education, he supports jobs, when basically he doesn't. And he's telling me, you know, he just, the fact that the lies and the deceptions, that part hurts the most.
You also mentioned that you were promised to be a part of the team, and that you give you a position.
Oh yeah, to be a part of the team. You know, you're a part of the team. You know, because I want to make changes. Yeah. It's our generation. He would tell me all the time, yeah, Daryl, this is our generation. Yeah, we're going to do some great things. You know, and I think what it is that his insecurities that he has, the whole Napoleon. To be honest, the whole Napoleon complex.
You're saying the mayor has Napoleon complex?
Definitely have a Napoleon complex.
What do you mean by that?
You know, he's afraid of other individuals that maybe are more politically savvy than he is. He wants to be the man.
Okay.
You know, this is my city. You know, and Doug Palmer was the same way. You know, well, he learned from Doug Palmer. They both, you know, almost to the father and son, political father and son, and until he decided to leave Doug Palmer.
Do you think that's evident? His Napoleon complex is evidenced by like his interaction with the people?
Or? People, very.
Do you think he listens enough to
he didn't. He did not listen. Yeah. I mean, he should have. The idea was, I'm the mayor. In the beginning, he first got elected. He didn't want to listen to anybody. My brother Raphael Matt, and the other ones closer. I listen to them. Or Jojo Giuliani. Those were individuals that he wanted to listen to. I mean, there were people that came to him and gave us some sound advice. He didn't take place. So you had all these people fighting against each other, and he just made the mistakes you shouldn't have made. I mean, to be a seasoned politician,
right?
Supposed to be a seasoned politician, I believe three-term freeholder, and to go into City Hall and make these type of serious mistakes, judgment errors. I mean, I even question that. I mean, I'm like,
Would you support him again if he ran again?
No. There has to be a change. See, there has to be someone that has to come in who's never was a part of Doug's team, Tony's team. Just that whole Doug Palmer crew. You need someone who's never been a part of that. That whole thinking. Of appeasers. Good time Charlies, Sporty Joes. Good time Charlies, individuals that want to give the kids entertainment. Let's dance, let's have a good time, let's get drunk, snap our fingers, party. Sporty Joes, individuals that focus on totally sports, on way of building up the kids, building up society, bringing these kids together and all that sports. Never education. See, and that's one thing when Tony Mack had his town hall state of the city address.
Right.
He did not mention, I don't think he mentioned, he maybe spent a minute on education, spent an hour on parks and recreation. So that tells you where his mentality is.
You don't think his priority is?
No, the priority is not on fixing education like Obama. He went after health care. He shouldn't have went after health care. He should have fixed the economy, focused on bringing jobs in the economy. Tony Mack the same way. Recreation. This is easy to fix parks. Build a baseball field and recreation centers. You can play basketball and all that. But to deal with education, and this is the third-rate type of politicians that we have, that will not deal with education because it's too hard to fix. It's too complicated for them. Listen, they got elected because they were popular. They didn't get elected because they was the real qualified ones to do the job. And so the people get what they deserve whatever they get because this is what they voted for, and this is what, you didn't question it, you didn't challenge it, you just said he was a good athlete. You said, oh, I partied with him. We had a good time, and certain same people on council, and Doug Palmer. They're all a part of it's foolishness in this city. And I just want to be, I'm very honest about that.
What about some people that might say that reforming education or improving education on a city level is going to take too much time? Why not work on more immediate things that may have more?
No. There's nothing more important than education and jobs. Bringing education, jobs in the city. Nothing else. You can deal with sport, but that should not be the main focus.
Right.
That should not be the main focus.
What results do you think can come out of reforming education? Can it improve the economy?
You can improve the economy. You get kids in college. You get kids stop being violent towards each other. You get kids going to college and educating and coming back and getting jobs. You get kids on who want to focus on economics, focus on science. I mean,
So it sounds like you're calling out a variety of people.
All of them, man. They're terrible. They're terrible. Really, they're terrible because we shouldn't have. Facebook activists, politicians in the city, the black politicians in the city.
The churches too.
The churches? I mean, we're a small city. You tell me you guys can't come together and sit down and deal with these problems? Have churches on the street. On Sunday morning, on Calhoun Street, right in front of Shiloh Baptist Church. Spring Street, there's Daniel. Bring your churches out here. Right? But you go to their churches, you give them their tithes, you pay their tithes and the money, but they can't, they're great preachers and they're doing all these great things, but they can't fix the problems of the inner city. It can be fixed. They just have to have the will to fix it. And none of them have the will to fix it or know how to fix it.
Where do you fit in this? Do you see yourself affecting change or just merely as a watchdog?
No, no. I mean, I bring ideas.
Okay.
You know, nonviolence education. Dr. Bernard Lafayette, I'm on the phone with him constantly, like once a week.
Who is that?
He was Martin Luther King's aide in the 60s. You know, people don't know. Other than Mrs. Edith Savage, you know, I brought 4 Martin Luther King aides to the city of Trenton. Fred Shuttlesworth, Reverend Bevels, Reverend Al Sampson, you know, and Dr. Bernard Lafayette. I did the 40th anniversary of the Selma Montgomery March, where I marched 52 miles. So I know the same individuals that Edith established when she was young, she met, and I brought them here to Trenton. You know, and so I have a connection with these individuals. I've sat down, Reverend, you know, I've spoke to them. And it's not just a sad state in the city of Trenton, but a sad state all over America.
Right.
You know, Black America. You know, as kids talk about, you know, well, kids talk about, you know, we love the Democratic Party. A lot has to do with Democratic. 40 years, Trenton has been controlled by the Democratic Party. All right? Camden, the same thing, 40 years, Democrat. Newark, 40 years.
Look at those communities.
And black control, 20 years of Trenton. And look at the community. 50 to 60% dropout rate.
Right.
More crime than ever before, more kids going into the prison industrial complex, and you're a black leader and you can't do anything about it, you accept it, because it comes from the white Democratic power structure to say, accept it, don't do nothing, don't say nothing about it, accept it, shut up. And that's what all these type jokers are about, shutting up. And people think, oh, these politicians are so wonderful and great. You know, why is Christie kicking their behinds? Democrats' behinds. You know, because these guys are smart, they're lawyers. You know, they're political science majors. They're not just people just say, oh, you're my son, so I'm going to go ahead and put you elected, I'm going to appoint you as a freeholder or a state senator or assemblywoman, or your father was this, or your mother was this, so you're going to be the same thing. You have no political experience, so you're just going to be a assemblywoman or a state senator or a freeholder. You know, you haven't been tested, and I tell people this, when it comes to, you know, I'm focused, this is, you know, black politicians. Most of the black politicians in the city have never been tested. Never really had a debate, had an open discussion, been tested on issues on education. How are you going to fix education? How are you going to fix jobs? How are you going to deal with the crimes and the violence? You know, they've never been tested. Well, some white politicians too, when it comes to the Democratic Party. You know, look at our libraries. You know, Brian Hughes had an opportunity to do it, you know, in Mercer County. They did nothing. They did nothing for the city library. They didn't give anything.
Now we're left with one, the main branch.
The main branch where we're at right now. Hello, thank you.
Academy Street,
On Academy Street, but he did nothing. He did nothing. But you elected them. You give him your votes. He did nothing. You know, it bothers me. Malcolm said what? You've been hoodwinked. You've been bamboozled.
Right.
You know, and you still supported foolishness. So what do you think is going to change in the next city election? Nothing. Another popularity. You know, another popularity.
But you do see that change is necessary.
I see change, but are the people in the city willing to make that change and better themselves politically? Knowledge. See, knowledge is the key. You keep on, you know, knowledge is the key. Political knowledge.
I mean, having a conversation with former GOP chairman Michael Steele, he was saying something to that effect too, but he was talking about it from the Republican standpoint. But a lot of times people in urban communities won't listen to what the Republican Party has to say because they're so used to the democratic structure.
Why should a black kid be a Democrat?
A lot of people, right.
Tell me that. I have a grandson.
Right.
You know, Malik. Why should he be a Democrat? All he sees is violence, gangs, dropout, crime, in prison.
Sort of blind allegiance to the Democratic Party. Yeah, it seems as though
he would be a Tea Party or independent.
But Daryl, I mean, ultimately, with coming forward with the Inside Truth, what is your aim or goal in coming forward with this at this time?
My aim is to wake people up.
Okay.
You know, about this administration. And Tony Mack has some decisions to make. Is he's going to stay with the same type of foolishness that Palmer and he has within the city,
will change. But I don't think it's in him to change. Plain and simple as that. You know, same with city council. You know, all of them.
Do you see things changing if you perhaps ran for office?
These fools, I'm gonna stop. They'll never vote for me. They'll never vote for me. Even though I ran for Congress, U.S. Senate, and debated other people.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote policy on education, jobs, the war in Iraq, all this stuff. You know, I've been on C-SPAN. I've been on News 12. You know, I've been in the Korean news, national newspaper twice. Curry Post. I mean, I've been in all types of newspapers that have a news blog, one of the top news blogs.
Today's News and Jay.
Yeah, Today's News and Jay. I've done all this other stuff. You can't have him as city councilman, you know, because this is the ignorance. You know, I'm not bright enough, maybe. You know, I don't party, I don't drink, you know, I'm not a football player, a basketball player. You know, I mean, that's how it is, or, you know, or someone from the political black elitist family says, okay, we're going to put our hands on Daryl and, you know, vote for him. They're not doing that because they are still afraid. You know, it's just because they're weak, because they want individuals that they know that they can control. And this is why the Republican Party, this is why you have a Christian office. This is why the state assembly and other individuals who are Democratic Party have no power at all.
What about, you know, as far as you coming forward with this inside truth about Tony Mack and JoJo? I mean, somebody suggests that you're just bitter or disgruntled because you didn't get a job in the mayor.
No.
This is a personal grievance and not something substantive.
Am I upset that I can't be a part of the city, that I know I can work within the administration, that I know I can make some great changes and bring some ideas? Yes, I'm highly pissed.
Right.
You know, yeah, I wanted to do some things. I was excited. You know, it's not like I'm part of the other team, and you know, and they got fired. I'm upset, yeah, because I wanted to do some great things for the city.
Right.
Education, you know, deal with that, deal with the violence, the crime, some of the ideas I had. Yes, but you know, there's a big world out there. You know, but you know, it's politics as usual in the city of Trenton. Hopefully, I pray to God, but I don't think things are going to get better in the city of Trenton. I just don't see it. Not this type of leadership. And not just Tony and administration, but certain members on council, the black churches, and the Facebook activists. I just don't see it. Yeah, I've been an activist, I guess I was about 25 years. I've helped people, and I've seen stuff all over the country. Hang out with Harry Belafonte, all this other stuff. So I've trained with other activists. I talked to other activists. I started young, it just doesn't. And I've seen how other cities are, and we have a major crisis going on in the city, and I don't think none of these individuals they don't have the strength. Including Tony Mack. He doesn't have the he can't challenge Christie. He can't challenge certain other individuals. Hell, the people that ran for mayor, they would have never challenged Christie. And even the ones to the council. Can they challenge the governor or senators? If they have that inner strength to say, I'm going to speak the truth. Some people come to you and say, well, I'm going to do what's right. We do what's politically right, and sometimes, especially a lot of times, what's politically right is not always what's right for the people. We have to be more, like Martin Luther King talked about, what's morally right and constitutionally right for our people. Politically right says lock up black kids. Send them to jail. Politically right is saying sending these kids, the adults, to more prisons and not trying to rehabilitate. Politically right is, let's build the parks. Don't give them the quality education they need. A lot of these young kids, they're smart kids. I hate to say, people say they got dumb kids. They're smart kids, but they're undereducated. They're not getting what they need to take it to the next level.
And that's why you're suggesting that the education system needs to be improved.
Oh, yeah.
Your affiliation with Giorgiani.
I met, I want to say about JoJo. I met JoJo. I've heard some things about it in the paper, and I met JoJo through Tony Mack.
Okay.
Working in the last campaign, and I was suspicious about him because he always had this way of talking, his way of like he was this gangster.
Okay.
He was the last Don of Trenton.
That's the way he came off.
Yeah, like he was the last Don, and I said, I looked at him, I was kind of laughed and funny, and when I started to realize that this was one of the individuals that backed Tony Mack and Mack listened to, and financially, and other things that he supported Mack in, and I tried to understand this whole relationship. Here's a man that JoJo that thought he was a part of. He used to say, "I'm a part of the Bilderberg." This elite family or individuals that are running the country.
Okay.
And I'm like, come on. I'm thinking, is this the guy Tony Mack, listening to? And I'm sitting there, and we did have some type of relationship, with dealing with this. And it was one of the things that I dealt with individuals that I didn't like the Palmer team. I totally disliked the whole Palmer team, regime.
You call it regime?
Yeah, I call it regime.
Okay.
So you're dealing, and so you had to work with individuals that were suspicious, they wasn't right, but if they're working the goal to get the whole Palmer team out, but then I start to realize that these individuals was somewhat of an extension of the Palmer team. They're part of the whole family. These individuals, they all, JoJo, Mack, Palmer, all these other individuals, they all work together. They all helped each other out. They raised money for each other, raised money for, he did stuff for Palmer.
Right.
So, I'm like, when does it stop? My thinking is, when does we get rid of all these individuals that dealt with the whole the Palmer and the Mack administration, and deal with individuals like JoJo and that oftenly called black people spooks.
Oh, JoJo.
Yeah, telling me, Daryl, you're different than the rest of those politicians, the black leadership. They're spooks, they're appeasers. They're and JoJo was a Republican. He's a Republican, so he used to tell me all this stuff. About black people, both black politicians, and I'm like, come on, you have to. I would tell him all the time when he would say that. I said, you can't say that, man. You got, He look at me and start smoking a cigar and say, yeah, all right, whatever. And I had some real issues with him. I said, you're selling crack pipes.
Out of the store.
Out of the store.
Okay.
The clear pipes. And it's okay. And so I think what it is, what happened with me, a lot of stuff boiled up in me. I just said don't want no part of this anymore.
So that was my next question. I mean, what made you come forward at this time?
What I think was after the recall, having him in the discussions and realizing, this guy was just straight lying to me. After you lay, you lay your credibility out on a line for this individual, and these individuals, the Mack administration, and you're speaking out for them, and you realize that you think you're doing the right thing, and you're doing the right thing for them because you don't like people fighting up against them, speaking out against him and his administration, and then you're lying to me, the one who is speaking out for you,
right,
who is telling the same thing what those people saying, that you're not a liar, you have credibility, and you're not a deceiver. And it's like, next thing you know, he's deceiving me. So I just said, listen, I can't deal with this no more. And I don't see him fixing education. I don't see him fixing the jobs. And the thing is, he may get elected again because of how people think in the city.
Trend politics.
Yeah, the trend politics, popularity. And, but that's up to the people,
right,
to decide. I just don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm to the point, I'm almost through with the whole city politics of Trenton.
But playing devil's advocate, some might say that, you know, Trenton, people in Trenton actually make an informed decision. It's not simply about popularity. What would you say to that?
Well, look what they voted for. You know, look what the people that are, look at the record. 20 years of Palmer.
Right.
Failed education, failed jobs, more gangs, more violence. So 20 years of that, you know, you've been informed for 20 years, and then who do you get? Palmer's understudy, you know, who he's not a savvy politician, very insecure. So I mean, what do you get? The same thing that the lesser of Doug Palmer. So you know, so you want that? I mean, this was you support, but you had to look at the other candidates too that ran for mayor. I mean, all these guys, most of these politicians, besides maybe one, who was I think Whedon, that wasn't a part of some way of the Palmer regime.
Frank Whedon, yes.
Yeah, Frank Whedon, I believe. I think, am I right? You know, all of them, all those individuals except Frank Whedon dealt with Doug Palmer and didn't question none of the stuff. And even, you know, so come on. You know, these are the type of politicians that you really want to support. You know, and these are the politicians will not take things to the next level because they can't take it to the next level because their education level, their mind thinking is not to take it to the next level, meaning run for U.S. Senate, run for Congress, run for governor one day. You'll never see these type politicians running for governor eventually. You'll never see them running for U.S. Senate. You'll never see them running for Congress. They're only good for the local politics in the city. They can't take it to the next level.
And that's why you call them third-rate politicians.
Yeah, like if you look at Cory Booker.
Okay, from North America.
Yeah,
North. Okay.
You know, he's thinking about, they talked about him being United States Senator, governor.
Perhaps governor, right.
Or president one day.
Right.
You know, so do you get that talk about any political politicians in the city? No, you don't hear that. Why? And people think, oh, these are great politicians. You know, they're bright. Oh, they're the best.
Right.
They all, most of them, listen, 90% of these politicians in this city are appeasers, and they answer to the white Democratic Party structure.
I mean, would you specifically call out any names, like
they know
Zach
who they are.
Chester, or any members of city council?
No, listen, they already, names? You know, listen, they know who they are. You know what I mean? I mean, this is all you got to do is listen to them at city council. What have they written? You know, you look at people. What have they, like? For instance, when I ran for U.S. Senate, I was interviewed by the Star Ledger.
Okay.
You know, I think I even showed you some of the stuff when they said, well, you know, Daryl Brooks can talk about education, health care. You know, things like education, health care, poverty at length. So, you know, the idea is that, you know, can these individuals discuss issues on education? Can these individuals discuss issues on jobs, openly? Political policy, government. You know, how do you fix education? How do you fix the crime in the city? You know, I took something to Tony Mack, and I talked about, we had during the, when they had they thought the girl was raped she was on West Street, Roman Towers. Right. I had brought in people about dealing with nonviolence education, actually teaching kids on education about nonviolence. Actually teaching, because the idea, if you've been taught how to read, you can taught how to write, you can taught how to do math, you can be taught about nonviolence education. You know what I mean?
You brought this to Tony.
I brought this to Tony.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'll look into it. I think I might show up. Never showed up. And, you know, and that was during the election time. Right, election time. So it made me like wonder, you know, what am I dealing with here? It just bothers me. You know, well, you know, it just bothers me, and now, you know, I decided that, you know, I just can't deal with this anymore. You know, when does the truth come out? And, you know, I feel bad for the youth, for the younger generation, because you have politicians that are third rate in the city. You know, they're not able to take it to the next level. Even to say activists, you know, you got Facebook activists out there.
What do you mean by that? Facebook
you know,
activists?
you know, I've seen some stuff. Somebody printed out some things and showed me some things and says like, you know, well, they're not really activists. They make these little quotes and certain things, saying things, you know, but they're not really. They have the mind to develop real ideas and how to deal with real programs. They have the rallies and talk about violence. Oh, we got to stop the violence, but none of them know how to stop the violence. You know, and it's like the city, third-rate activists, third-rate preachers. I mean, we should not have to, if, you know, issue with Tony Mack, and it's not just Tony Mack, it's the preachers, it's the other activists. You know, they can't come together, and as Tony Mack, as the mayor of the city, he can't bring all these people. See, as a mayor, that's what you gave able to do. Bring people, good leadership, bringing people together, sitting down and having a discussion for the betterment of the city. You got Shiloh Baptist Church, you got Reverend Armstrong, you got Darius Daniels, you got all these Galilee, you know, Harris, all these different churches, Griffin, all these, and they're not prepared to make the sacrifice to deal with the violence and gangs and bringing people together, making the streets safer. Then you got your Facebook activists making these comments, oh yes, this and that, oh yeah, this and that, you know, but they never was activists ever before. So now they just want to be an activist now. They didn't. Where did you learn it from? Who trained you? You know, what did you study? I mean,
So it sounds like you're finding it. You know, the opportunities for Trenton are kind of bleak. But do you think that could change with activists like yourself holding people accountable, being watched off? Do you think it can change?
It can change, but the idea is that these are other individuals willing to listen. And is the people willing to stand by other guys like myself? You know, and that's the key. You know, I studied the civil rights movement. I studied other activists from around the country, around the world, how things are done. We can make certain changes. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be the fact that our foreparents are living better than we are. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. Only we'll, you know, it can change. But are the people willing to fight for that change and to sacrifice? See, that's the thing, sacrifice. Right. Are the people in the community of Trenton, are you willing to sacrifice their lives, their bowling alley games, their, you know, going out and partying to fix this city? Energy to fix this city. The preachers are willing to bring all their people out in the streets and staying out all day and all night and protect the city. If they're not willing for that sacrifice, and I don't believe that, you know, because, you know, they could have done it if they wanted to do it already.
So you think it's a matter of will?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, Daryl, thank you for your time, brother. And
keep doing what you're doing, brother.
All right.
And you know what? Another thing, L.A. Parker. You know, when it got me upset, and it made a lot of people rage that he compared me to the two individuals that killed Megan. The guy, Jimmy Dominguez, that killed Megan Canker, and the other guy that killed the girl, Higgins' girl.
The L.A. Park, you were referring to?
Yeah, L.A. Park and Collins. And, you know, and I was upset about that. I want to talk about that. I was upset because when that girl gang member, when the gang members killed that girl on Martin Luther King Boulevard, that Divine Allah had the Black Panther. Tamara Leonard. You know, I took the picture and I got a lot of heat for that. He's going to say in the paper that, you know, Daryl Brooks is an asset to the community. See, that's how it goes tonight. How can I be an asset to the community? He says this. It's in the paper. But then now when I have a protest, someone he doesn't like, you know, he calls me, you know, he compares me to these two individuals that murdered two white girls.
He did this in print or on his radio show?
In his print.
Okay.
You know, and these guys, you know, he'll never debate me or have a discussion because they, you know, a lot of them won't. You see, they won't discuss because they know how sharp I am and I'm willing to speak the truth. You know, I asked them all to come out. You remember on that show, individuals, you know, let's have a debate, let's have a discussion.
Right. Yeah, we had a discussion about that.
They won't do it. And that hurt me from L.A. Parker because he knows better. He knows better. L.A. Parker, you know better. He knows. He compared me to two murdering, that raped and murdered two innocent people. He compared me to that because I spoke out for Tony Mack. I get the stabs, I get the shots, you know, threats, death threats, and all that. And then a year late before that, when the girl poor girl got murdered, you know, I took the photo that made the front page of Trenton Times and Trentonian. You know, I was an asset to the community. You know, let me catch you at Barnes and Nobles. You know, that's what
yeah. Okay.
I go the other way when he comes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sometimes. But you know, that's what he said, and that was terrible. I mean, that hurt. You know, how he would say that, and then made more people even hate me even more. So I took a lot of hell, man, for that. You know, I took a lot of hell. People, I can look in people's eyes, in some people's eyes, they looked at me and said, yeah.
So you think it's an unfair comparison?
Oh yeah, come on, man. You know, I mean, you know, anyway.